Mr. Speaker. Rural and tradable sector.
Mr. Speaker.
I call Aaron Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, what you just heard, people out there in the House, was actually voodoo. Voodoo that the Labor Party put forward in their belief that they have some bizarre idea how to run the economy. But it's actually economic illiteracy, Mr. Speaker. See, what you've seen, what you hear from the opposition is no understanding of basic economic principles. It's a bit like Groundhog Day, and every time I stand up here and I talk about our budget, I feel like I'm saying the same thing again and again and again. Because they don't seem to get it, Mr. Speaker. The fact that we inherited an economy that was in recession year after year. Labor do not seem to understand that. They're either can't read, can't write, or just too damn stupid to be able to get there, Mr. Speaker, I believe. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, this is a good budget. In fact, I think it was a great budget. And I think in time we're going to see some wonderful things. See, Mr. Speaker, we had up there earlier on this afternoon a whole group of young people standing up there listening to speeches from this side of the House and that side of the House, and they loved it because this government is going to reduce the debt that they're going to inherit. Those people over there would rather have an additional $5 or $6 billion a year to be borrowed that the young people in New Zealand, like my young children, would have to pay back in the future. See, Mr. Speaker, Labor is on a bit of a sideshow. They don't really seem to care about the future generations. All they want to do is borrow some more money and spend it on their toy little projects. They don't seem to care about some of the issues, about getting the incentives right for New Zealand, getting the ability to put in place the taxes structures that allow people to invest, save and grow the economy. Because, Mr. Speaker, every 1% increase in economic growth is worth $3 billion to our economy by 2014. That's $3 billion that we can spend on things. And, Mr. Speaker, if we had that money, maybe it's an idea to have a discussion about that. But it's absolute economic voodoo and illiteracy to talk about, and stupidity, Mr. Matt, absolute lunacy to be able to be in a position to say, let's spend money we don't have yet on things that don't work. You see, Mr. Speaker, Labor are so focused on other things that are unrelated to the economy. They're focused on sideshows. And they're not focused on the economy. They're not worried about economic growth. They're not worried about interest rates. See, every 1% increase in interest rates costs New Zealand, costs the taxpayer an additional $500 million, $500 million. It's another $500 million you have to borrow. And every dollar we borrow increases the risk of interest rates going up, Mr. Speaker. See, we're still borrowing about $10 billion a year this year. Well, that's not good enough. But we're having a budget that we've put in place that allows to bring us back to surplus by 2016. That's years and years earlier than the budgets that Labor were putting forward. Mr. Speaker, we had a momentous moment a couple of weeks ago, and the Labor Party didn't even mention it at all. You see, we had a thing called a current account surplus. When I was at university studying economics, people talked about what a current account surplus was. And the important thing about a current account surplus, was when you're in surplus, that's when New Zealand is paying its way in the world. We had the first current account surplus since 2002, for one quarter, a couple of weeks ago. The first current account surplus since 2002. And do you know what was driving that, Mr. Speaker? It was growth in exports. It was changes in the way people were putting money and changes in the incentives, how government was spending its money. You see, we've heard over there, again, voodoo, stupidity and illiteracy about jobs and growth. Well, if the government has to borrow money to employ somebody it's wasteful, that's not a real job. And in fact, people in those jobs don't want those jobs either. But I tell you what's a real job. In my part of northern Christchurch, off the coast there, is soon to be one of the largest mussel farms in New Zealand. The prior government, when the Labor were completely against aquaculture. Aquaculture has the potential to make, I don't know, $1 billion extra or something on that order of magnitude. That one mussel farm will employ approximately 200 people in my wider community. That's a wonderful thing for our local people. I think it's a great step forward. We had in our budget, we had the Prime Member over there talk about issues around R&D. Well, we're very fortunate today in the House to have actually the Minister of Science in the House here, the Honourable Dr Wayne Mapp. And I want to talk about some of the initiatives that have been put forward that are happening this year and beyond in science. See, we have the ability in New Zealand to reposition actually real money into science. the ability to put in place about $300 million in money that will actually be invested in real outcomes for real people to get real growth. And I think that, Mr Speaker, is actually really, really good. Mr Speaker, what we've seen over there in the last few days is just some bizarre behaviour by the opposition. And we've seen that reflected in the polls. So, Mr Speaker, I'm a bit concerned about the people sitting over there now, and I look across the room over there at the moment, and at the polls that came out only a day or so ago, the Labour would lose 8 or 9 MPs. And I think that the 5 people with a member of the opposition sitting over there would be very, very worried about if I was them, about some of the way they're going. And maybe you should think about that when they're talking about some of the issues about the economy. Because, see, it is exports that'll grow our economy. It is lower taxes. Because, Mr Speaker, it's not about whether you put more money into buy a new machine or not, about depreciation. It's about the bottom line that exists, the cash flow of the business. And the decrease in the taxes actually gives companies choices. It gives them choices whether they actually want to invest in training. Because training, our most valuable thing we have in New Zealand is our people, not our machines. Anybody can buy a machine. It's the smartness of our people. And if a company has less money to spend on people and spends it on machines, simply because the tax structure says that's the way to go, that's not the right way to go, Mr Speaker. But a lower tax rate allows giving them the incentives to invest in things, our people's brains. That's the major advantage we have in the world. We're a small country. We're never going to have the biggest, flashiest machines in the world, but we can have the smartest people. And the lowering of the tax rates, of company tax rates, encourages incentives for that. Lowering of the tax rates, of personal tax rates, gives the incentives for those people, workers, to say, I want to work an extra shift. I want to work extra shift because that gives me a bit more money in my back pocket. Because, see, Mr Speaker, this budget, and I'll say it time and time again, puts in a place where families of workers earning $50,000 and 2 children pay no tax. And I think that's a great thing. I think it's a great thing because those people will be better off in New Zealand than they will be in Australia. And I think it's a good thing, despite any changes that may occur in the tax switching, those people will still be better off in New Zealand and Australia. And, Mr Speaker, that's what you've seen happen. You've seen migration results come through since we've been in government. We've had plane loads of people come back to New Zealand and not go to Australia. Plane loads of people. We've had a net migration. Well, to that member over there, if you actually learn to read a graph, he'd actually understand that this is what happens this time of year. It's the middle of winter. It's the middle of winter. And you actually look at the numbers. I encourage you to go to a few websites and understand this, Mr Speaker. But you see, when you actually look at it, we've actually put in place some wonderful things around asset management. We had the member from Hamilton East over there talking earlier about some of the great infrastructure projects. The Waikato Expressway, which he likes talking about. But in my part of town in New Zealand, there's a place in Christchurch where we have a wonderful new motorway. We have broadband initiatives going in place. With our northern motorway being put on an agenda of projects that have been delayed for years and years, Mr Speaker. We are using our assets smarter, and I think that's a good thing. We are looking at turning around, investing large amounts of money in our rail network, because that's needed. Despite the fact that the prior government spent a huge amount of money in a lot of waste, and I don't think that didn't make a lot of sense. We've spent large amounts of money trying to sort out issues we've seen in terms of switching efficiency in the state sector, and I think that's a good thing. You see, you ask most bureaucrats who turn around and think they might not be productive, but if money is at least spent on them and on the productive centre, that's a wonderful thing, Mr Speaker. Because if only we continue to have a current account surplus quarter on quarter on quarter that we're paying away in the world. And we had the first ever current account surplus in 8 years. And I'm proud to be part of a government that actually saw that thing happen. Mr Speaker, we have an ability over the next few years to see some wonderful things occur. We have the ability to see growth. We have the ability to see performance improve. And when the budget was prepared, about actually 8 weeks ago, on April 16th, since then we've seen amazing improvements. We've seen actually improvement in export prices. Like dairy farmers out there are looking at about $7 a kilo for their milk solids. I think that's a good thing. We're seeing improvement in terms of growth and orders coming back to our manufacturing sector. And for me, I spent a number of years working in the export manufacturing sector, and it's a tough business. It's a tough business selling things to the Chinese and the Indians and everyone else around the world from New Zealand. But our smart exporters can do it if they get the right government policies. And our government is putting in place those policies. Because we have, in John Key and Bill English, a sphere of economic leaders who are putting in place an economy that will grow and will see the future for my children and my grandchildren to stay here. And I think that's a good thing. Thank you.